Hi, it's Magic Lance. I'm the independent creator of the adventure romance webcomic Changeling. If you want to check it out, it's free to read on my Patreon and other comic hosting platforms. All links are in the description.
In this video, I want to talk about some of my writing tips. I thought I'd make this video because I know some of you watching this might be looking to enter the 2025 webtoon contest, and while I'm not entering it myself because I do not have the mental fortitude to do a full color webcomic, still, I wanted to share some of my creative story writing tips anyways. These are just some of my practices when I write. Everyone's style, voice, and ideation is different, but that's why writing is so powerful because your style is unique to you. However, there are some tried and true tips and literary tools that can help elevate your creative writing to make it even better. I am by no means an expert or professional, but I do like to write for fun, and I've been practicing creative writing as a hobby for many years now, so I thought I would share some of my tips and tricks in this video. Buckle up, it's going to be a long one. So with all that said, let's jump into it. Imagery. So I'm a visual first writer because I'm a visual artist. This makes comics my ideal for storytelling. I've always enjoyed storyboarding concepts even if they never leave the scribbled pages in my sketchbook. I have story ideas built for a visual format in the sequential imagery. However, before I even begin to draw anything, I know I have to write out my ideas first so that I know exactly what I must draw. Because I have a background in the arts, it makes it easier for me to write with imagery in mind because when I think of ideas, it often appears in my mind like a movie. The images, the shot direction, the point of focus or emphasis on certain moments, and the timing of scenes. I know not everyone thinks like me, so I can't lead you to a fail-proof way to write, but I do like to sketch ideas and doodles on the side as I write. If I have a new creature or setting I want to introduce to my story, I do a small sketch for what they might look like, or I gather references together to make a little mini collection of visual ideas I'm able to work off of. Even if you aren't drawing them for a comic or story for a visual format, you should still make a character sheet to track all your characters' qualities so they don't get lost in the sauce during the extensive and complicated writing process. I suggest noting down as much as you can for each character, no matter how small the detail. Even if those details aren't seen in the story, at least you prepared it in case you do want to explore those characteristics later. Build your world in your mind's eye and think of all the colors, the flora, the fauna. Who are the inhabitants? You want to paint a picture of your world that you see in your own mind in the mind of your readers through those descriptive details. Tip number 2, act it out. Now go into a quiet place, make sure you are alone to avoid extra embarrassment, and read that shit out loud. If you're tripping on your words while reading dialogue, or if it sounds kind of stilted in the responses of your characters.
You mean he tried to kill you? Incredible. And then he died.
Your dialogue is probably a bit too complex. We speak naturally when we're going about our lives normally, and talking with others, our speech also changes with who we talk with, and dependent on the situations and settings. So reading it out will help you avoid the first signs of a stilted dialogue. Acting it out, or step-by-step imagining a scene, is the next approach. Close your eyes and imagine in your head. Or if you have the space to be alone in a private area, rehearse your scene. I had to do this in one of my animation classes, writing out a scene and then acting it out in front of the class. It was humiliating, but this practice alerted me to so many unnecessary details and steps in a scene that just junked up the flow of it, especially for a very exhausting task of animation. If I went straight into animating it, I would have been stuck having to do so much more work than what was needed to get the same idea across. Now, in the case of depicting action scenes, they are very complex, requiring multiple steps to communicate what is happening. In fact, to write a good fight, you should be writing your fight scene like you do for dialogue. It's a conversation. Newton's third law of motion states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is integral to getting it to flow right and naturally. It is where we as writers are able to communicate who has the power in a fight between two characters, or how it may shift between them and how they engage with each other in combat as part of demonstrating that balance. Where one punch is thrown, how does the opponent respond back in this physical exchange? You might want to think of other questions like, what is the character's body types? Does one have a bulky frame and more of a heavy hitter than agility? Is one character more lightweight on their feet and able to outmaneuver their opponent? If the character gets hit, how do they continue to fight with this injury, and how does it impair their senses or ability? This is why acting it out is so important. Step by step, imagine it in your head or act it out. If you can't do that, you can use 3D models on this free site, Pose My Art, or observe instructional videos about hand-to-hand combat. Same thing goes for expressions. If you have a mirror, look at the expressions on your face. Where does your skin crease? Where does the face constrict and stretch? What are subtle ways to express an emotion? Humans have a pretty good ability of reading emotion from tone and expression without any dialogue or written explanation. Let's say a character bites their lower lip. Their nostrils will flare, brows will furrow together. You can assume that they're feeling frustrated or angry. Use these subtle body language signs to elevate your writing and communicate your character's emotions. Put yourself in your character's shoes. What would they do? How would they react? You have to put your mind in that headspace and act it out in their character. Tip number 3. Make a habit of intentional observation. I like to observe things around me. Ordinary life has its uses in writing as well. Let's say I want to write a scene of a knight entering a dragon's lair. The dragon spots the knight. What does it do? I then go and I watch my cat, the closest thing to a cave-dwelling monster that I have. I watch him as he tries to hunt birds out the window. I watch closely and take notes. He shifts his weight from foot to foot, steadying himself, moving low to the ground as he edges closer, his belly scraping the floor, his pupils constrict tightly, locked on his unsuspecting victim. Opening his jaw slowly, his tongue curls in anticipation for his next meal, as though he can already taste it. And then he hits the glass. But it sounds pretty similar to a dragon, right? Maybe not. That was a poor example. What my point is here is to observe the world around you. Your most effective tool in writing is from your own life experiences, your own emotions, and your own perspective. It becomes a lot easier to write about and relate to things written when you have first-hand experience of that topic or how it felt to go through it. Because, well, you lived it, so you're your own expert. I take note subconsciously at this point of habits of others or their stories, especially in places that I don't want to be. I take note because all of it is material for the writer's mind. I like to observe people's habits, their way of speaking, and mannerisms. This is all poured into my writing. Obviously exaggerated and embellished, but it's in there. Much like how art is formed from the ability of artists to observe and express the illusion of life through their artwork, you have to study from life to write about it too. And that means you have to write from your experiences and how we interact. Observe body language or speech patterns when people are happy or uncomfortable. What do they do with their hands? Or maybe their eyes break away from yours? What is their tone of speaking? Is it with confidence or are they more reserved? Do they look up when they're recounting a thought or do they avert eye contact when they're lying? These little details of the people around us help us enrich our written characters with that extra level of realism because there's thought put into every action you're writing into your characters despite these actions being subconsciously acted out in our everyday life. Artists learn to draw by observing and recording what they see. Writers can recall our emotions, feelings, and memories we experience, the people we meet, and the stories we hear. These are all great sources of inspiration and can be an endless well of knowledge that you can draw your ideas from. If you write details that have been drawn from your own life experiences, you're grounding your story in reality in a way. Of course, there are things out of our ability to experience firsthand, and especially when you're writing fantasy or where you haven't experienced it yourself. My cat may act like a vicious foot-biting dragon, but he isn't actually a dragon. I have to do a lot of research before I write. I spend many hours Googling about topics or watching YouTube videos of first-hand accounts of other people who have experienced things that I've never experienced before, especially for people who have experienced injuries or emotional trials. I listen very closely to see what they've gone through and all the many ways that had impacted their lives thereafterwards. I can't even begin to imagine how it would feel myself. Therefore, if I want to write about something, I make a point of doing the research first. I ran into this issue when I was writing Changeling. My main character is an apothecary making black market opium on her island. Yes, Rue was Breaking Bad. Little Eisenberg. But I had to do so much research about this because I don't know a thing about this topic firsthand. I don't know anything about medicine. I'm a fucking artist. I draw pretty pictures and I cheated in science on my light and optics test in high school. I suck at any kind of math or science, but yet I still was inspired by the chokehold opium had in the Victorian era and I wanted to write about it. So I would note down tons of info, even though only a fraction is shown in my actual comic. Likewise for the Guano Islands my character Rue is from, was inspired by the failed Guano Island called Clipperton Island. Its gruesome yet forgotten history inspired me to write it into my story. I stumbled upon this very disgusting chapter in human history and researched it as much as I could, and I picked and pulled some of the elements and put it into my own story. Now this isn't to say you have to write full research papers on these topics to even be able to write about it at all, but it does give your comic a nice flavor of realism to it. Look at Breaking Bad. Some of Walter White's stunts and science was tested by the Mythbusters, and these Walter White science hacks were busted for not being able to melt a body with the chemicals that they got in the show that would melt through the ceiling and floor. But yes, it could partially dissolve a corpse in theory and was still extremely dangerous. It doesn't deny the story for its efforts. The research that was done by the writers was enough to suspend the viewer's disbelief, enough to be immersed in the story and be able to enjoy these concepts that are exaggerated for entertainment's sake, but are born from a hint of truth. It wouldn't be possible if the writers didn't research these topics to write about and world build with. We are not experts in everything. That is why we must learn from life and from others who are experts, and we must research to make our stories even better. Let's say you want to write about a character who uses an old 6-chamber revolver. Research it. Watch videos about the shot distance and how it's held, what ammunition is used, and what does it look like. All of these things will enrich your writing and your comic. I know it may seem like a pain and even silly waste of time, but what I'm trying to say is that research is a part of being able to create an effective suspension of disbelief. This is the secret sauce that makes your story immersive. J.R.R. Tolkien took this to the next level with extensive world building and even creating an entire working language. Readers want to escape. That is why they read stories. So let them, and treat them to a rich world of your own creation and give them what they want. Juicy details. And if you want to take the subtle world building route, sprinkle in flavors of believability and passing dialogue or small interactions with characters in their world. Fans will return to this world you create again and again because they want to get lost in it. They want to experience that adventure like they did the first time that they read your story. And to give them what they want, you have to do your homework first and put in the work to build that world out the best that you can. You have to craft it from the ground up to make it feel real, and that does take time, so allow yourself to study from life. Tip number 5, get it checked. Get someone you trust to read your work. Okay, I'm a huge hypocrite here. I'm super guarded with sharing my creative writing, and no one on earth has read my comic Changeling in its entirety other than me. I am the only soul who knows what will happen next, and I'm going to keep it that way. However, with my professional work, I make sure to have family members or colleagues help with reviewing my work before I share it. I highly recommend getting another pair of eyes or several on it because after work on a writing piece or even an artwork, I grow blind to my mistakes and often miss simple, dumb errors, especially with grammar and spelling or redundancies in my writing. Yes, English is my native language, but I am so bad at spelling. It's so embarrassing, and my horrible spelling mistakes I have made in the past, I've been endlessly mocked by my family, and I will never live it down. They still make fun of me about it to this very day, and yes, I deserve it. So please get someone to edit your work and give you their honest opinion about it. I know it's embarrassing, and I know I'm a total hypocrite to even recommend this because I don't do it myself, and I admit it, but don't be dumb like me. The difference is that I just don't give a shit about what other people think of Changeling. It's for me, and people just get what they get with it, and I won't change shit for nobody because I'm lazy. But if you're planning on publishing your comic seriously or submitting it to the webtoon contest, get it checked, at least for spelling and grammar. Please, you only get to submit it once, and then you cannot edit in the submission thingy once you do, and I would absolutely hate for one small mistake in spelling to be any kind of reason that your work isn't appreciated for the amazing work that you put into it. At least just get it spell checked. Tip number 6. Give up on being original. You aren't original, and that's not a bad thing. We demonize tropes so much these days, and it's not helping us improve as writers. And here I want to direct you over to Pantheon Talks channel because Apollo hosted an amazing roundtable of comic creators that discuss this very sentiment. Using tropes and archetypes, even cliches, is not a bad thing. Think of the entire span of history, all the folklore and spoken stories passed on with morals and messages woven into each narrative. We can draw connections to stories on completely other ends of the world. They didn't copy each other's stories. They are just using these techniques to carry the message that the storyteller wishes to pass down to their audience. Therefore, that means you don't need to bully yourself into trying to invent a new color because they already all exist. So just mix them up and paint the damn picture already. Author Christopher Booker noted that there are only 7 basic narrative plots in all of storytelling frameworks throughout history and across the world that have been recycled in different settings, characters, and conflicts in fiction. Those 7 types of story are 1. Overcoming the monster. 2. Rags to riches. 3. The quest. 4. Voyage and return. 5. Rebirth. 6. Comedy. 7. Tragedy. It's an interesting concept to see these connections among every story we encounter in every form of media. And I suggest if you're a writer, familiarize yourself with these concepts. There is a wealth of stories that still feel new and interesting despite the fact that these same tropes have been used and told thousands of times before. So don't let this discourage you from telling your own story. All you have to do is focus on how you can bring your own flair and style to it that will bring your audiences in. Good artists copy, great artists steal, in which I stole this quote from Picasso, which he also probably stole from someone else. This is not intended to support plagiarism, but it's a play on the idea that original ideas in a world as complex and rich in culture and history as ours is damn near impossible to achieve from a writing standpoint. We all must lean on narrative tactics such as the hero's journey and basic plot structures with establishing setting, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. However, I don't say this to discourage the idea of trying to be as imaginative as possible. I'm saying this to calm your mind of potential writer's anxiety of trying to stand out from the rest. Originality doesn't always equal a good story. Yes, it's refreshing to see something done differently or adapted into a different setting, but plenty of good stories are based off of obscure old folk tales or cultural inspirations that have existed for centuries. So release yourself of that expectation and embrace writing what you enjoy and know that it can be great on its own because you're putting your own voice into it. I actually recommend that you watch as many shows and movies that you can. I was very lucky to be exposed to good films from a very young age. I remember it was a core memory watching Princess Mononoke for the very first time. We had a Japanese copy with only English subtitles, and my older brother had to narrate the subtitles out loud for me because I was too young to read fast enough yet. I loved it. I would rewatch my favorite films over and over again so that I could take in every detail, and I took notes of the things I like about each story I experienced through animation or comics or books. How did they communicate these themes? What made the characters sympathetic or what made me hate them? I would gather this mass inventory of ideas and notes and throw them into my own writing. These stories and themes are executed beautifully before and are proven to be successful. All I need to do is pull my favorite things and add my own flavors to it. Ashitaka's calmness and empathy for both sides made him a strong inspiration for my main male lead. However, I wanted my male lead to be a bit more arrogant, have more cowardice that made him more vulnerable as a character. So I looked to characters such as Longku from Fire Emblem for emotional vulnerability affecting his cowardice related to his own past trauma. And then I looked to characters like Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop for his overconfidence and cocky arrogance. I took as many of these characters and their qualities as I could and I copied them into my own work. And yeah, I also stole their design. Work smart and stop trying to exhaust yourself trying to reinvent the wheel and just fucking write what you want. Tropes and character archetypes are present in thousands of stories throughout history for a reason because they are effective at communicating certain types of personalities and messages. And yes, your characters should change. Your characters should not stay the same throughout your work. They have to learn, grow, and adapt with each event they experience like we do in our own lives. We must change for the better or for the worse. I recommend you study characters from your favorite books or films that you enjoy. Note down as many things as you can that draw you to that character, and then put those observations into your own work. Tip number 7, practice. I know this one is objective, but you have to practice to get better. And to practice, you actually need to write a lot of other stuff that is in your story. Listen, it doesn't have to be boring either. I promise you, I wouldn't do it if it was boring. I have the attention span of a fruit fly. But this is how I got better. Start a prompt writing journal. Every other day or each week or whenever you can pick a prompt and spend 10 to 20 minutes just writing off of that one prompt. Explore writing different genres, even if it's not your thing, especially if it's not your thing. Look, I love writing horror, comedy, fantasy, and romance stories, and I have fun writing in these genres, but I don't often write science fiction or even regular slice of life stories because I get bored from slice of life, or in sci-fi, I feel like I don't think outside the box enough, and my default style is just poor rip-off Space Dandy. Also, if you haven't watched Space Dandy, you need to. Don't let all the boobies fool you. It's actually a fucking masterpiece full of expertly used literary device. Okay, anyways, practice these genres you're uncomfortable with, because even if your story isn't in that genre, you can't have action happen every second of the story, or else it wouldn't be as impactful when it does happen. There will be quieter moments in your story, the spaces in between with simple slice of life moments, also drama or political discussions, or maybe even a side plot romance that happens in your character's life. Thus, we must learn how to write in areas that we aren't used to. I'm also a hypocrite because I hate big political talking heads and shows, and I know it's for world building or whatever, but I pass the fuck out as soon as I see that round room in Star Wars, and I wake up when they get back in the fucking spaceship again. Therefore, I just cut a bunch of it out in my own story because I'm not here to bullshit, like I know how to write that. Anyways, an example of a perfect balance of action, political drama, horror, and romance is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It is absolute perfection, and you're doing a disservice to yourself if you don't check it out at least once. There's gravity and stakes within every encounter. Characters actually feel powerful or menacing, but also have growth over the span of the entire series. And even for characters with small parts in the main story, their presence was developed enough and captivated the audience empathy that when they're gone, it hurts so much more than you would expect. There are also repercussions for every action event and consequences for characters' decisions that they will eventually have to face. I could never write a story as perfect as Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, but I will try my hardest to achieve even a fraction of this very special feeling I get when I experience a great story like this one. And that motivation is what fuels me to try harder with every story I write. That is why I believe practice is so important to get more confident when writing these scenes in your story so that they don't fall flat to readers. Readers aren't stupid, so you need to grow your skills to match. Writing prompts have forced me to think in ways I normally never would have, and in turn helped me when writing these kinds of scenes. Having a buddy helps as well. My mom and I would pick a prompt for a week and then we'll write it on our own time, and then we would read out our prompts to each other and see that our stories and approaches are completely different. She would take a more poetic stance from a prompt and I would take more of a comedic tone. This is how you can use these prompts to your advantage. Use the prompt as the main route and branch your story out from there and twist it where you can subvert audience expectations. I take this as a challenge every time I write, especially with comedy scenes. I try to focus on how I can flip something from one thing or mold it into something absurd or completely unpredictable. Never let them know your next move kind of work. I remember I got a prompt like, write about sandwiches. So immediately I'm like, no fucking way am I going to waste my time or enjoy writing about an actual ordinary Subway sandwich. So I flipped it to write a small excerpt mockumentary style of a camera crew following a sandwich. Yes, a witch with pointy hat and shoes with a broomstick who lives in a hut on a beach in Tampa, Florida, as they observe her daily life and struggles and her natural habitat. This is how you twist it to your advantage. These short prompt exercises are great to strengthen that writing muscle and may even be the start of your next big idea. I know it may seem cheap to use a pre-made idea to kickstart a story, but doesn't everyone get a prompt to start their story in some shape or form? An idea is an idea, so just run with it. Don't overlook the power of it. Tip number 8, scrutinize. I know this may seem counterproductive and may be a bit aggressive tactic, but I believe it's necessary to help keep redundancies and plot holes from coming up. I'd say this tip is more of a refining practice of mine when my story is near completion. This is the process that I do. Create a timeline of your work and log specific plot points across the years or months if it's a long overarching narrative. Note all your main events down and clues revealed or resolved for each one in a document to avoid unresolved plot points by the time your story ends. This is different from a story outline because this is a timeline of the context lore before the story and thereafter, plus the plot points from the story outline. If you're keeping it all up in your head, that is some major work because big stories often have many twists and turns, and with all the work and things we have to do already writing it out and editing, we may forget some of these details, and to avoid that, I suggest logging it down in a timeline. And then the part that I dread yet is essential to my own process, I try to embody the most neck-bearded, basement-dwelling, actually Reddit accent critic, and then I read my story from the beginning to the end, and I rip it to fucking shreds in every way I can imagine. I scrutinize every detail, every moment, every action, every spoken line of dialogue and reaction. Review your work for any tiny discrepancies in the story with the actually mindset. Every few months I review my story script this way, and I put my skeptic hat on and I nitpick it into oblivion. Who is this character? Are they important? How is this resolved later? What supplies do they have in this scene and where do they acquire it? Where is it stored or if it's lost? How many days would it take for a wound of this severity to heal? And so on and so on. After several revisions, the discrepancies become less and less. Even though my goal for my story was to take the soft world building approach where the nature and the environment are often left explained while establishing base ground rules of nature and sorcery in the world, I still have to have these explanations written down for the most part. Even though they're on part of my story, they still help me accurately build my world and society according to its lore. I have to find ways to show how power is limited, to emphasize the stakes in the story and the real threat of death and injury jeopardizing their journey and each character's physical strength. The hard part is resolving these discrepancies because we want to give small nods to it in the story. This can be done with quick reference and passing conversation where it won't seem out of place or forced or even showing a resolve visually in your comic, but try to avoid exposition dumping away the plot hole. Sometimes it's unavoidable and explanations are needed. However, it's important that the setup warrants this discovery. Maybe leave the explanation off until later for viewers to guess and theorize for their detective work to then be rewarded many chapters later with a passing explanation or nod to the resolve. Tip number 9, planning. As the sole creator of Changeling, which is my masterwork of years of writing, I decided to write the entire script out in novel format. I chose to make it a comic because, well, that's how I see it in my brain. It was always meant to be experienced that way. Therefore, all of the descriptions in my script are for myself to remember how to direct the pacing or the focus with every scene, along with other visual directions that I need to execute for at that point in the story. Anyways, I finished the entire script before drawing anything, and that took me since 2015 to 2022 to accomplish in its entirety. However, if you're coming up with a story to submit for the 2025 webtoon competition and don't have years to dedicate to a single story, I understand that endless time to revise your story structure and plot points is not a luxury that you would have at your expense right now. However, I urge you to write your whole script out as much as you can. I know there's the argument between plotting versus pancing and the Hayao Miyazaki's story process. He doesn't write a script like that. He uses pancing method. Well, you aren't Hayao Miyazaki. He is Hayao fucking Miyazaki, and he has decades of experience in storytelling. So if you're a beginner or intermediate level, I still urge you to just write it down. It doesn't have to be extremely detailed, just enough to build off each plot point. I do not recommend starting a long-spanning journey without any prior planning. Please, I repeat, do not draw anything without bare bones plot rundown of what is going to happen. I'm going to be a major hater here, and this is just my opinion, but this is my beef with Lore Olympus and why I shit the bed with its horrendous pacing, poor tonal control, and ultimately massive fumbling of the ending, losing all prior buildup and any of the emotional weight in the story. I feel like I have a stroke every time I try to read it. The whole timeline is just so fucking whack. I cannot for the life of me understand where the fucking plot is, if there even ever was one to begin with. I hate it. I'm not sorry. Anyways, now that I've exposed my bias between these outlining methods, I'll proceed with the explanation of these different styles. I won't go into too much detail here or else this video is going to take too long, but I'll give you the quick and dirty rundown between plotting, pantsing, and the plancer approach, which was my writing method. From this article here, Plotting versus Planting, Weighing the Methods and Their Merits by David Costello. Plotting is the method of crafting a story that involves a structured planning process, laying out the main events, character arcs, and other crucial elements of their narrative before the actual writing begins, detailing every twist and turn during the way. Pros: maintain consistency, ensures characters remain true to their acts and premeditated actions. Settings remain unchanged unless intended, and the storyline remains cohesive. Less plot holes or inconsistencies. Plot holes that disrupt a reader's immersion and compromise the story's credibility. Writers can visualize the entire narrative structure, making it easier to identify potential issues or contradictions. Once these gaps are spotted early in the process, they can be addressed and rectified. Allows for more complex plots. Intricate storylines have the ability to be built upon with greater detail that might be challenging to develop spontaneously. You can interlace multiple character arcs, foreshadow events, or introduce subplots that converge together at the story climax. Cons: might feel restrictive. Sometimes this method might box writers into a corner, smothering their creative flexibility. The narrative might begin to feel too structured, lacking the organic flow that some stories benefit from, leaving it to feel robotic. May stifle spontaneous creativity. Rigid plotting can sometimes suppress these unplanned bursts of inspiration from writers. Writers might feel obligated to follow their outline to the letter, missing out on spontaneous twists or character developments that could enhance the story. I kind of argue that if there's something I am stuck on, I focus on parts that I see more clearly and then make a small note for what I need to happen at a certain stage of my story, and then I leave it off. Since I think about my story all the time, I would be in the shower and then I would get an idea and then I'll fill out the gap in the timeline when I have that idea. This is my solution to this issue, at least. Potential for over-planning. Planning and over-planning can be a difficult balance. When writers delve too deeply into plotting every minute detail, they might find themselves overwhelmed by sheer volume of information and decisions. Okay, butting in again, because my argument here for this one is that is where the refining and streamlining your story comes in handy, with minimizing excessive lore dumps and such. But I believe write everything down as much as you want, and don't worry about over-planning. Just allow yourself that freedom to brain dump it on the page. This is only just the beginning, so just get it all out in however way that you can. On to the next method, pantsing. This method involves little to no premeditated plot. Instead of having a detailed outline like plotters, pantsers write primarily by intuition, allowing the story to unfold organically as they write. Pros: allows for organic character and plot development. Pancing often has a natural evolution of characters and storylines without stringent plot to adhere to. Characters often feel more lifelike, growing and adapting in ways that even the author might not have initially predicted. This organic development can resonate with readers, offering them characters that feel genuine and relatable. Leads to unexpected and original twists. Since pantsers don't strictly map out every turn in their stories, they're more open to those sudden bursts of inspiration that lead to surprising plot developments. This unpredictability often sets pantsed stories apart, offering fresh perspectives and original plots. Offers flexibility during the writing process. Pantsing is all about embracing the fluidity of the creative process, granting them the freedom to explore various narrative paths as they write. This flexibility can make the writing experience more enjoyable, allowing the story to be as dynamic and evolving as the process itself, which I still feel like you can get from a plotter story if you jump around to fill out other areas in the story. Like, you aren't limiting yourself to writing it in a linear method, but building a plot like one puzzle piece at a time. Okay, anyways, cons. Risk of losing direction or focus. With a pre-established plot to guide the narrative, pantsers can sometimes find themselves meandering through the story without a clear endpoint. This lack of direction can make it challenging to maintain a cohesive plot or ensure that character arcs come to a satisfying conclusion. Readers might sense this drift, feeling that the story lacks a defined purpose or direction. More extensive revisions later. While the spontaneity of pantsing can lead to brilliant and unexpected plot developments, it can also result in inconsistencies or plot holes. Certain elements introduced early on might not align with other developments. This can cause the need to apply extensive revisions during the editing phase to ensure a coherent and polished narrative. Can result in unfinished projects due to lack of clear direction. The open-minded nature of pantsing writers might struggle to bring the story to a satisfying conclusion, leading to many drafts left in limbo. The absence of a roadmap can sometimes leave authors feeling lost, resulting in projects that remain perpetually unfinished. Pantsers. God, I hate saying that word. It's the best of both methods, creating a balance between the structure of plotting and the creative freedom of pantsing, enabling writers to craft narratives that are both organized and flexible. Writers incorporate elements of planning into their process, setting up a basic framework or key milestones for their story while allowing room for the narrative to evolve organically, embracing unexpected developments and inspirations as they write. Pros. Balance structure with spontaneity. By having a general outline for key milestones in place, writers can ensure that their narrative has direction and coherence. At the same time, they're free to deviate and explore and allow spontaneous ideas to flow, leading to a rich and dynamic storytelling experience. Allow for planned milestones while retaining creative freedom. Having set milestones or key events can act as guiding posts in the storytelling journey. They ensure that the story progresses and culminates in a meaningful way. However, how one gets from one milestone to another is left open, granting writers the freedom to innovate, experiment, and naturally drive the story forward. Cons. Requires a certain level of adaptability. Embracing the pantser method demands a flexible mindset. Writers must be willing to shift gears, reevaluate their direction, and possibly amend their initial milestones based on how the narrative evolves. It might prove challenging for those used to a strict structure or complete free-form writing. Risk of being neither here nor there. It can sometimes lead to a narrative that lacks the tight cohesion of a fully plotted story, while also missing out on the raw, spontaneous energy of pure pantsing. If not well balanced, a story could feel disjointed or aimless, leading to reader disengagement or a narrative that feels stuck in limbo. I call bullshit on this one here. As a planter's peanut. Fuck. Okay, you know what I mean. I find that flexibility is tight enough in this method to connect and thread those complex webs through to tie the ideas together. Oftentimes, I would write out a character with one theme in mind. And then, let's say I have a life experience or I watch a very interesting documentary that sheds new light on that exact idea. I would then rush to my script and pour these ideas into it. Then the challenge there is that I look at the big picture. What led up to this point? Was it a random act of fate, or was it a cause and effect situation? Who is this character after this experience? And then I scroll forward in my story and I fix up what I need to match the middle, and then I scroll back to the end and I adjust the story and the characters to fit what happened thereafter that event. Life changes us and our stories, and with a story like mine that has evolved over several years of my life, I learned a lot and changed it in that time. And through applying those details and threading them through together, you can make a beautiful tapestry with this method. If you're interested in more details about the steps in creating an outline for your story, you can check out this link to the article in the description, or just Google basic writing outline steps and use that to start your own. Tip number 10. My last tip is have fun, and just do you. I can't tell you what to do, and you know your story best, so follow your intuition. With every story you make, you will improve. Embrace the process and don't fight the flow. Just write. Simple as that. That's pretty much it. I put off making this video for the longest time. I feel like I forgot to add a lot of things, but I'll never be able to finish writing the script if I try to remember everything. So I decided to just put this out for now. Maybe I'll make like more tips later in like a part 2 or something. I don't know, but this is all I got at the moment. I hope some of these tips help. I'm no expert writer, but I enjoy it, and I hope you can embrace this art form too. If you're joining the 2025 Webtoon contest, I wish you all the very best of luck. Please tell me your story submission in the comment section, and I will check it out and support it. And then I will see you in the next one. Bye!